Imagine, July 24th, 1943, the Pacific Ocean west of Truk Lagoon. The water is eerily still. Aboard the submarine USS Tinosa, Lieutenant Commander Lawrence Daspit peers through his periscope. In his sights, a crippled 19,000-ton Japanese tanker. It's dead in the water, helpless. Daspit has already hit it twice. This next shot should be the kill. He steadies his breath, lines up the crosshairs, and gives the order to fire. The torpedo launches, a silver streak cutting through the water. It strikes the tanker's hull with a perfect thud. And then nothing. No explosion, no fire, just the vast, unnerving silence of the ocean. In that single, horrifying moment, Daspit realized the unthinkable. America was fighting a war with weapons that didn't work. 18 months earlier, the U.S. Navy had entered the war with supreme confidence. Admiral Chester Nimitz believed his submarines carried the most advanced weapon in naval history, the Mark 14 torpedo. This thing was a beast, 20 feet long, weighing 3,000 pounds, carrying 600 pounds of high explosives. It was guided by a secret magnetic trigger, designed to detonate right under an enemy ship's keel, snapping its spine in two. On paper, it was a masterpiece. In reality, it was a masterpiece that couldn't kill. You see, the Navy had never properly tested it. Since 1926, they had only conducted 2 live-fire tests. Just 2. One of them failed. But budgets were tight in the years before the war, and at around $10,000 a pop, torpedoes were considered too expensive to just blow up for practice. So engineers relied on theory and tests with dummy warheads. When war finally came, the weapon was still a mystery, and it was the sailors in the thick of combat who would be forced to uncover its deadly secrets. By early 1942, the reports coming back from the Pacific were grim. Submarine commanders were firing entire spreads of torpedoes at enemy ships, only to watch them fail. Some ran too deep, passing harmlessly beneath their targets. Others detonated too early, hundreds of yards away. A terrifying few even malfunctioned and circled back, turning into suicidal boomerangs aimed at the very subs that fired them. The failure rate was staggering. An estimated 8 out of every 10 torpedoes failed. And each time a commander reported a failure, the response from Washington was the same: blame the men, not the weapon. The Bureau of Ordnance, the powerful and proud institution that designed the torpedo, insisted their creation was flawless. The problem, they claimed, was human error. Inexperienced captains, poor tactics, bad aiming. But one man refused to accept that lie. Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood, the commander of the Pacific Submarine Force, was a submariner through and through. He had lived the silent, claustrophobic life beneath the waves. He knew the skill and courage of his men. He trusted them. If they said the torpedoes were broken, he was going to prove it. So, in June 1942, Lockwood ordered his own secret tests off the coast of Australia. He had his crews fire torpedoes through fishing nets set at specific known depths. The results were immediate and undeniable. Every single torpedo ran more than 10 feet deeper than it was set. Lockwood sent the data to Washington. The Bureau dismissed his findings as unscientific. Furious but undeterred, Lockwood ran the tests again. The results were identical. The evidence was piling up. And finally, Admiral Ernest King, the Chief of Naval Operations, demanded official trials. The verdict was inescapable. The Mark 14 was running 11 feet too deep. A simple flaw in its depth sensor caused it to dive deeper the faster it went. The Navy issued correction orders, and for a moment they thought the problem was solved. It wasn't. A new problem immediately emerged. Now, the torpedoes were exploding prematurely. The secret magnetic exploder, so revolutionary on paper, was too sensitive. It was being triggered by the Earth's own magnetic field. Imagine the frustration. A perfect shot, a guaranteed kill, ruined because your own weapon was malfunctioning hundreds of yards from the target. Entire attacks on Japanese convoys failed. Lockwood and Nimitz had no choice. They ordered their submarine captains to disable the magnetic trigger and rely only on direct impact detonation. But even then, the failures continued. Now, the torpedoes would hit their targets with a solid clang and do nothing. This series of failures culminated in that fateful day aboard the USS Tinosa. Commander Daspit fired 15 torpedoes at that helpless stationary tanker. 11 of them hit it squarely. Only 2 actually exploded. The rest were duds. In a fit of frustrated brilliance, Daspit decided to bring one of the unexploded torpedoes all the way back to Pearl Harbor. Technicians swarmed over the dud, examining it from nose to tail. It was perfect. No cracks, no leaks, no defects. It was a perfectly manufactured, perfectly useless piece of equipment. Lockwood knew he had to take matters into his own hands once and for all. On the small island off Maui, he and his chief engineering officer, Commander Art Taylor, set up their own makeshift testing range. They started firing torpedoes directly into cliffs. Some exploded, many did not. When they recovered the duds and took them apart, they finally found the culprit. It was the firing pin mechanism. On a direct 90-degree impact, the kind of perfect shot every submariner was trained to make, the firing pin was actually decelerating too quickly, jamming before it could strike the detonator. The harder the hit, the more likely it was to fail. The textbook shot was actually the worst possible shot. Lockwood acted immediately. He sent out an urgent message to his fleet: stop firing at 90-degree angles. Instead, he ordered them to aim for oblique, glancing shots. It was a desperate, counterintuitive workaround, but it cut the failure rate in half. But Lockwood wasn't done. He knew his men needed a real solution. Aboard the repair ship USS Holland, his team of engineers got to work. Using salvaged aluminum from downed Japanese aircraft, they completely redesigned and machined new, lighter firing pins. In September 1943, nearly 2 years after the war began, the submarine USS Barb sailed out on patrol with 20 of these newly modified torpedoes. The results were breathtaking. Every single one worked. Every torpedo fired exploded exactly as intended. After years of frustration, humiliation, and loss, America finally had a torpedo that could fight. The effect was devastating and immediate. In 1942, while wrestling with the faulty torpedoes, U.S. submarines had sunk just 134 enemy ships. By 1944, armed with weapons that finally worked, they sank nearly 500. They choked Japan's supply lines, starved its industries, and effectively strangled its war machine from below the sea. The same weapon that had once betrayed its crews now became the decisive tool that crippled Japan's empire. But this victory came at a terrible price. 52 American submarines were lost during the war. Over 3,500 sailors went down with them, many lost during those long, dark years when their primary weapon was more dangerous to them than to the enemy. When the fix was finally confirmed, Lockwood called it V-Day for the submarine force. But he never celebrated. He knew too well what that victory had cost. After the war, the Bureau of Ordnance finally admitted its failures. Inadequate testing, institutional pride, and a culture of secrecy had led to a catastrophic design flaw. The cost-cutting that saved a few $100,000 on pre-war testing ended up costing thousands of lives and nearly lost the war in the Pacific. The story of the Mark 14 torpedo is a chilling lesson in the dangers of arrogance. It proves that technology is no substitute for truth, that even the most respected institutions must be questioned, and that sometimes the bravest act in war isn't firing the weapon, but having the courage to stand up and say, something is wrong. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. We'll see you in the next one.